In this video, I will show you how I turned these 2D boxes into this 3D spaceship. But before that, we need to understand how I realized that this was the way to go. Earlier this year, I modeled a large spaceship for Ultranova. The first level takes place on a spaceship and I needed the exterior of that ship for a cutscene intro. I went about this my normal way, mostly by randomly pressing E to extrude and S to scale to turn a single box into a big ship. It's a fast way to model spaceships and you can make them look pretty cool. But there were two problems. First of all, the polygon density of the ship was not high enough, which made the ship look like big flat surfaces at close range. And secondly, when I designed the level to take place inside the spaceship, and for the cutscene to make sense, the different parts of the ship needed more purpose. So I thought of a new way to design and model the spaceship. Stay until the end of the video where I will let you know the final polygon count of the spaceship. First, I brainstormed ideas of what theoretically would be needed on a spaceship. For the purpose of the story, there needs to be a lot of cargo space, but I also needed it to have propulsion, communication, and defense mechanisms, so my list grew. I created a Google Slides presentation and began to place my ideas into a layout of boxes. Command deck, side-mounted containers, side loading bay, interstellar trading containers, small container storage, bottom-mounted containers, ore grinding pistons, retractable landing deck, shield generator, defense blasters, fusion reactor, storage engines, VTOL engines, front deflectors, comm arrays, and it went on like that. While I made this layout, I was considering what would make sense from a spaceship design perspective and for my first level to make sense as you move from left to right in most platformers. When I had a layout that made sense, I started Blender, and with a mirror modifier, because we love symmetry, I began to create the same boxes from the layout but now in 3D space. I named the boxes to represent what the module would be so I could replace them with detailed counterparts in the next step. The deflector shields could not be simple boxes, so I used my normal extrusion method to shape the front deflectors into arcs like the layout, but this time in a third dimension. I also added deflector surfaces at the back of the 3D model, which I thought would balance the spaceship. This primitive box version of the ship only took about 30 minutes to make, and now I had a solid starting point to add details that would solve the low polygon density problem from my first attempt, as adding details for something like a comms array or defense blasters would give me many more ideas to incorporate into the design. And this new ship will reflect the layout of the first level of the game, so both problems can be solved. The detailed version of the ship took about 12 hours to make. I started with the deflector shields and I added a surface subdivision modifier to make the deflector shields smoother. I imagined that the deflector shields would also benefit from extra armored plates along the top and bottom. I'm also a huge fan of symmetry and repetition, so I extruded an array of supports from the armor plates and curved them into a ribcage-like formation. To simulate the interior of the spaceship, I use emission where the command deck is and in parts of the front deflectors. The blue emission sort of makes sense, since a camera outside the spaceship would likely overexpose the light coming from the interior of the ship. I modeled a lot of the spaceship with a black background and with a viewport set to EV render or material preview, so I could get an idea of what the spaceship will look like inside the game. After the front deflectors were done, I repeated the process for the rear deflectors. I do my box modeling with the surface subdivision modifier enabled so I can see the result directly. Again, an external rib cage-like support structure, and then I made holes and a layered look of the rear panels. When previewing the ship with moody lighting, I was pretty happy with the shape. This cargo transporting ship would be able to plow through debris with the front protection that got a bit of a mean helmet-looking shape. Since I'm not UV unwrapping or texturing this spaceship, I have to use polygons to add detail. I simulate edge wear of the armor plates by using the knife tool and adding worn corners, and I move the UVs of these corner regions to the shiny parts of my Imphenzia Pty palette texture. Next, I selected and separated box by box from the primitive spaceship into new objects, and I renamed and modeled these detailed counterparts one by one. I modeled the VTOL thrusters, again with surface subdivision modifier. I had to take care to make sure that the pivot point of the VTOL thrusters would work and that the thrusters had enough space to fold back. Then I made the detailed version of the command deck. I had to do this one twice because Blender crashed and I had not saved since the VTOL thrusters, and you live and learn. Then I modeled the big air intakes, and I know, this is a spaceship, but it uses air when it flies in the planet's atmosphere, so there, Then I made the detailed version of the retractable landing deck module, and after that I made the shield generator module. It was much easier to add detail to the ship now. I had plenty of ideas for things and shapes that would go into these modules. I still rely a lot on loop cuts, extrusions and repetitive shapes, but I got about 10 times more details with this modular approach. I kept replacing boxy module by module with detailed counterparts. The comm array module with satellite dishes, communication antennas and thick hoses, the robot bay, and the side-mounted containers. Every now and then I zoomed out and hid the low-detailed box version of the spaceship to make sure that the new modules had matching looks. Then I added defense blasters, interstellar trading containers, the ore grinding pistons, and I already knew that I wanted to animate these pistons, so I added an armature, bound the pistons to the armature and animated a pulsating pattern. Next, I modeled the ore storage. Copied and modified to add more defense blasters, copied and modified the VTOL mounts to the rear VTOL engines. Then I added the small container storage, and I love repetition and symmetry. Did I say that already? So the lights above the small containers added a cool look. I modeled the large detachable containers at the bottom, which also attach to the rails running along the belly of the ship. Next, some red pressure canisters and downward facing lights. Nearing the end, it was finally time for the rear engines. Lacking a degree in futuristic engine design, I tend to make them sort of like jet engines. I made them big, with an orange glowing emission and plenty of pipes and some cover panels. I duplicated the engines and modified them slightly to fit next to the inner engines. Finally, I modeled the fusion reactor with pink emission and an exomodule that you'll find out more about in the game. Well, I thought I was nearly finished. As it turns out, I had to make forward-facing blasters, air filtering units, cryo storage, drone base, water storage tanks, docking base, scrap storage, and an openable rear. 12 hours later, the spaceship was pretty much done. I spent another bunch of hours animating the spaceship and camera in Blender, so I could see somewhat what it would look like in the game when I was rendering it with Eve. I also added volumetric fog, HDRI lighting, and I bought engine effects for $5 on the Blender market to rapidly add some thrusters. Engine effects uses geometry nodes to create customizable animated flames of different types, and I thought it was a bargain at $5. I will have to create my own thruster flames inside Unreal Engine, so engine effects was a huge time saver since I just needed them to preview what they could look like. So now I have a spaceship with enough polygon density, and that makes sense in terms of the layout for the level and lore. An added bonus is the fact that this ship consists of modules, so I can reuse them for additional spaceships and layouts, so this is my next generation of modular spaceships. Thanks for watching this video. If you want to see this spaceship in action, play the game and support my channel, consider wishlisting Ultranova on Steam. And of course, feel free to like and subscribe if you want to follow the development of Ultranova or learn about game development and 3D modeling. Until next video, take care and I'll see you then. Bye for now.